The dialogue that took place between Keller and Piper, there's actually two or three of them, but in the one that deals with, would we be friends? Keller mentions twice about George MacDonald. He questions whether MacDonald is even a Christian. Now, how could one possibly come to even think that, much less say it publicly? People can often think things but not say things publicly. But someone of Keller and Piper's stature, who in many ways are elders in the Neo-Calvinist Sanhedrin today, and when they speak, many listen to them, how could they so curtly and simply dismiss MacDonald in that way? Well, a lot of it has to do, again, with the revival of Neo-Calvinism, and there's this read of Calvin that goes through Augustine, that goes back to St. Paul, in terms of how they define authentic Christianity. And authentic Christianity is usually some read of the Institutes. Calvin reinforces certain Augustinian positions, and both are seen as the authentic readers and interpreters of Paul in the Bible, whether Romans or Galatians or other epistles in that sense. And those who don't fit within that particular agenda either don't understand Christianity adequately or simply are not Christians. The reality is there's many different ways of reading Christianity. Obviously there's the great Orthodox tradition, there's complex natures of Roman Catholic. But if we look at just one tradition, and that tradition, i.e. Calvinism, defines itself as genuine Christianity, then those who don't fit within it are not Christian. And in the particular interview, you get Keller mentioning, well, MacDonald was possibly Arminian, but even worse yet, Pelagian. Well, Arminius and Pelagian are seen as the enemies of Calvinism, and people that distort, misinterpret the nature of human grace and human responsibility and the relationship of choice and grace. But the Calvinists have often distorted Pelagian tradition. When Pelagius is read adequately and thoughtfully, he's no opponent of grace. He's an opponent of certain understandings of grace. Arminius in the 16th century, like Erasmus, is much the same. So there's this line and lineage of Erasmus, Arminius, Pelagius, and their read of Paul and Jesus. Why has one been trumped and defined as authentic Christianity, and the leaders of that define who's in and who's out? And why has this other tradition, the Arminian, the Erasminian, the Pelagian, and their respect for the Bible and read of it been so subordinated, misread, distorted? This says a lot about the dominance of one theological ideology and the dimming of another. And so when someone like Piper and Keller can dismiss MacDonald so curtly, it has very little to do with MacDonald's Christianity. I mean, most of MacDonald's sermons, his fairy stories, his literary criticism, which is voluminous. Most people have hardly read his literary criticism. It's outstanding. It's shot through every line with Christian thinking. And so to somehow say he's not Christian, that says more about a neo-Calvinist ideology which refuses to accept any other understanding of Christianity other than through a certain Calvinist, Augustinian read of Paul. And so such a startling statement by Keller, twice said, and he also deals with the Arminian Pelagian side, views of the atonement, which of course MacDonald wouldn't accept. MacDonald had certain leanings towards universalism. He drew from the probably most important Anglican divine of the 19th century, F.D. Morris. And so you can see that we've got two traditions in the West. If a person leans towards the Calvinist, as Piper, Keller, Carson, and many of these other people do, anything that doesn't fit, they're dismissed, or worse yet, they're seen as not being Christian. Now, C.S. Lewis certainly doesn't fit within the Calvinist tradition. It's interesting that people like Piper and Keller, they go courting Lewis, but they don't understand Lewis. Lewis is a Catholic in that old sense, hence his great admiration for MacDonald. And so the notion that somehow Keller and Piper and the Neo-Calvinists can be drawn to Lewis without really understanding who Lewis really was says a great deal about their misreading of large elements of intellectual theological history. And their misunderstanding, really, of C.S. Lewis, or their sanitizing and co-opting of Lewis to serve a Calvinist end. And Lewis would retreat in horror at such a use of him. So it's important when people understand Western intellectual history that the Calvinist agenda has so dominated in North America and had such an impact on the evangelical tradition that those who don't salute to that are often seen as misunderstanding their faith, or worse yet, not even Christians. And this is and helps you understand why Keller and Piper could see MacDonald as questioning whether he was a Christian. Given Lewis's admiration for MacDonald, they might even question whether Lewis was a Christian, following that line of thought. I was chatting with a well-known person this afternoon. I was talking with him about him, and he says, well, you might flip it on the other hand and say, well, was Calvin even a Christian?